Hey, what's up everybody? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video I'm going to talk about a DAP or digital audio player, which has a wide variety of prices out there, and this guy sells for just over $300. This is the Hiby R4 Evangelion edition, which is based off a 90s anime. At least, I'll be honest, as far as I know, because I'm not a huge anime fan, but I do like the bright colors, which was part of what piqued my interest. I've always liked the cyberpunk design, and this has already existed in a less expensive version several months prior to this one coming out. And the R4, the original one, was a great player. It retailed for about $250, I believe. Sounded fantastic. There were a couple issues with that. One of them being it ran a little bit hot. It uses Class A topology for the amp stage, and as a result, pure Class A runs kind of hot because you're running at basically full power, whether you hear all of that volume or not. And when you push transistors to that power level for Class A, that generates more heat. It also hurts battery life. So the Evangelion edition, which is a unique theme, it also has a unique skin, and I'll talk about all that in a moment. This guy makes a few improvements. For one, it's the same processor. It's the same Snapdragon 665 processor, or SoC, which allows Qualcomm's aptX support for Bluetooth if you want to use this for Bluetooth. However, there are two other changes to the specs. So the original R4 had 3 gigs of RAM, and the Evangelion edition has 4 gigs of RAM. The original R4 has 32 gigs of onboard storage, and this guy has 64 gigs of onboard storage. This also upgrades the screen slightly. It's a little bit brighter, and it's a little bit higher resolution. So if you owned the original R4 and you love everything about it, but the screen was kind of holding you back in terms of brightness, this is a little bit of an improvement. Now, another change they did to the Evangelion edition is the amp stage. So it's still Class A, but they reworked the power output. Same battery, it's a 4500 milliamp battery, but this one has a different power gating feature on the amp, which means it runs less hot and the battery lasts longer. It's rated for up to 14 hours. That's if you use it in pure mode, which disables the Android UI entirely, and running it at a lower output. I could never get that level, and it still gets a little bit warm, but not as bad as what I've heard compared to the R4s. I never used the R4 aside from some demos, which was always warm, but it's hard to judge at a show. So with this guy, it doesn't run as hot. I can handle this for a long period of time. I get safely about 8 hours of actual use. So for travel, that's huge. The standby power is actually quite good. I don't know if that's an improvement over the original, but when it's not playing anything, it does put the amp to sleep, of course, and the standby power can last for days. I've left this on and not being playing anything for a long period of time, and the battery was still, at a decent percentage, obviously depending on what you leave it at. So it does have a little bit of a drain, just like all DAPs and phones even, but it wasn't terrible. And when you actually use it, like I said, I got 8 for how I use it. I think you can get 10 plus if you're using it as just a music player only and not running any of the Android backend, because all of those apps, do consume a little bit extra power. So it is an improvement, and we're going to focus on this now as its own DAP and not so much comparing it to the original R4. So let's talk about what's included. Now, I'll admit, I wanted to review this because I thought the chassis was just sweet. I love the color choices. It's purple and green, and it just stands out and pops, and it's kind of different from what's normally on the market. You also get this strap, which you have to attach with the little buckle, which I don't know if it came with directions or not. I couldn't find anything. So I had to kind of guess, and I pulled this pretty hard, and it doesn't pop off. So have fun figuring that out, but it does hold pretty well. There are 2 things that this comes with that I love. One is the screen protector is pre-installed. I don't know how much documentation specifically calls that out, but there's already a cover on this, which is really nice. There also is an additional cover in the box. I wanted to start with this because if you don't know it already comes with it and you just see a protector, you might just go ahead and install this and slap that on and as it is. But there's already one there. So if this gets scratched up or ruined, just remove the screen protector that's there. Switch it out with the extra one that's included, which was really nice. It also comes with a couple other accessories I like. One is a long enough USB-C to C cable, which is good. It's not one of those 12-inch jobs. So there's some good length to plug it into a computer or use it for charging, of course. It has a single USB termination, but I'll get into the plug. So this same cable is used for copying data to the device and also charging it if that's all you want to use it for. It comes with a clear TPU case, which does show through the colors pretty well. It's going to dilute some of that brightness a little bit. I can't install it right now because I already put this strap on, but the buttons are basically, they stick out. It's kind of like an embossed button. It's sealed, which is going to help protect dust from getting into the buttons. and it doesn't change the tactility too much. I usually don't like using the cases. It does give you some extra grip and peace of mind. So if you're dailying this, then yeah, I'd recommend using the case, and at least you can still feel all the buttons. The other thing this comes with is a really nice piece of art. It's got basically a postcard, but I don't know if you'd actually use this to send it out to anyone. I just think it's a cool accessory. And if you're buying this because of the Evangelion theme, I can't imagine you wanting to get rid of that. Now the box and packaging, obviously quite nice, typical Hiby fashion. That little cutout there helps with when you slide this out to kind of let air go through, so that's kind of cool. And then, you know, everything is pretty much as you expect. You know, the inside has all these accessories in it, so I'm not going to waste time opening that. I want to focus on the DAP, so let's move this stuff out of the way and get into the UI. Before I show the full UI, I just shut this down, and I'm going to plug this in because you have to see how amazing this charging animation is. So the battery is just under 50% right now because I've been kind of doing some rundown tests again, and you'll see this Hiby logo turn on when it's plugged in. And look how cool the charging animation is. So you have a percentage in the center, which is pretty clear cut. The green represents the cells that are charged, and the orange is an animation that represents the cells that are to be filled, if you will. It's all purely on a software GUI interface. So it's kind of a cool interpretation of charging the device. And as this fills up, more dots will turn green until basically all of it's green. And you have, like, let's say 1 or 2 orange blinking lights or blinking hexagons left. So pretty cool charging sequence. I'm going to turn this on now, and we'll see this thing boot up. And I'm going to unplug this while this boots. Now, as I mentioned, the screen is an improvement over the original R4, but it's not crazy bright. If you're coming from a cell phone with a good screen, most DAPs will feel like a slight downgrade. And there's the Nerve logo. Nerve only, and I know that's part of Evangelion, so I'm not an expert. I grew up watching like nerdy stuff as a kid. I wasn't really into anime too much, so I'm not going to pretend I know what every single Easter egg means, but I can tell you that this unlock sequence is pretty cool too. So you can see, obviously the time, the theme, all that, it says Nerve only, and then when you slide to unlock, you can see it switches, it says EVA 01 attack, and you can just pull that up to actually unlock it. Now you can see the theme continues as far as the skin goes, and you can swipe right to see the additional applications you installed, and just like other Android devices, you can, press and hold to customize your screen. Swipe up from the bottom to see all the apps, and that does show you the Play Store. So if you want to install Reddit or Discord, you can actually do that on this. And it's a Snapdragon 665. It's not super powerful, but it will run those apps. Just keep in mind, if you install a lot of extra apps you don't need, it's going to drain the battery faster and slow the device down slightly. Before we get into all the audio stuff, I just want to show you the physical layout. So you have a micro SD slot, which is spring-loaded. There's no cover on it, so that's always going to be exposed. Just keep that in mind. Naturally, if you put the case on, that'll help protect it a little bit better. You have a volume up and down. You have a switch, which will toggle the side buttons from being functional or not. And when you flip that switch, there's a little lock icon on the top. And I can turn that off, and you can see that now the buttons are active. You have your power button here, track back, play pause, and track forward. On the bottom of the device, you have a 4.4 millimeter Penacon, so balanced output, 3.5 millimeter, and then the single USB-C, which also works for, again, charging or to be used as a DAC. Just in case you don't want the headphone jack on the bottom of the device, you do have the ability to reverse the screen. So you can see it says flip vertically. Just tap that. It's going to change it. And now we can hold it this way. So it'll hold a little bit differently, but now you have the jacks coming out of the top of the device. The other thing to consider is you don't have the buttons being changed. So everything's reversed. You have to hit volume down on the top button. Now you can notice when I'm pressing this, it says digital volume is locked. I'm going to plug in an IEM now, because when you have nothing plugged into it, it disables the variable output. And now I can do the volume. And then you can slide this up and down too, which is, again, this is another custom skin following the Evangelion theme. I really like this volume adjustment, and if you're adjusting it and you want it to go away, just tap the top or bottom and it instantly goes away. To make it easier for the button side, I'm going to flip this back the way it was, because this is kind of how it's intended to be used, and the layout is a little bit easier for me to do so. So I want to talk about the local player. This is Hiby Music. It'll give you a prompt when you open it for the first time. Now this has a decent amount of onboard storage. Obviously, if you're using FLAC or very high bitrate audio files, you're going to fill that up very quickly. The micro SD slot supports up to 2 terabytes, which is great. So the other thing I want to point out is you have this little blue light at the top here, that is based off the track that you're playing. So as you change it, let's say I hit play here. I'm going to go forward. Oops, I'm on the lyric side. So you can see how it's orange now, or like a soft yellow. And when I find the track, now that it's switched to green, this is a 96 kilohertz FLAC file. So the status light will change based off the source and bitrate that you're playing. It also has a unique color for MQA because this has onboard MQA unfolding if you still use that. The included player works pretty well for me. I never really had any issues or felt the need to upgrade and install my own, but keep in mind, because you have Android 12, you can just go to the Google Play Store and add your own. Now, if you swipe from the left, you can see that there are additional ways to customize this local player. Now, you can import music via Wi-Fi, scan your SD card, look at your downloads, customize your theme of the player if you want a unique look, and then you have different equalizer settings. It shows equalizer 10 band. Then you have parametric EQ, which is much more capable. If you're familiar with parametric EQ, you know how powerful that is, but I'm going to explain that further. Then you have something called MSEB, which stands for Mage Sound 8-Ball, which is, of course, my first guess I would have thought of. Honestly, it's a really weird name, but it is a proprietary thing that Hiby offers from a sound processing perspective. It is very powerful, and you can basically get the same exact results using just parametric EQ. The difference is this takes a lot of not only guesswork out for some people who are less experienced with parametric EQ and what you're trying to hear, but it also provides quick adjustments. You can obviously do profiles and quickly switch between things, which comes in handy if you have different sounding gear. But on the MSEB, you can see it says cool and bright, warm and dark for overall temperature, and cool and bright will thin out the bass and boost the upper mids and highs, so it will thin things out. Warm and dark naturally is going to boost your mid bass. So there are a lot of fun things you can mess around with on this. Now, this feature is exclusive to this player when you're accessing it from here. You're only changing the sound on the local player. There are ways to adjust this. If you swipe down twice, there's an icon that says audio settings, so I'm going to click that. This gives me everything and more, because now I have the ability to do global EQ, global audio changes, and that includes the parametric EQ function as well. So because you have global EQ, and this is just me kind of messing around, all I have to do is toggle it on. I can even adjust the preamp, so if I'm getting kind of aggressive, you can see it's adjusting it in real time, which is kind of cool. You can, of course, adjust the frequency. I can adjust the gain or the Q factor, which is kind of how wide or narrow this is. So it's nice that you can preview it, and then band 2, you can adjust that accordingly. The other thing I want to point out with this is you can change the type of parametric EQ. So that's set to a low shelf. I can set it to peaking, high shelf, etc. And you can see that all change. You can easily ruin your sound if you don't know what you're doing. So that leads me back to the whole MSEB thing, because again, it's really cool to customize. Now, I also have the ability to import profiles. So this one, it says tuning style. I imported one, and if you just click online, you can see a few different ones that are posted. And if you click any of these, it'll automatically apply those changes. So I'm going to hit back. You can toggle this on and off. Now, if you see the sliding rod range adjustment, fine tuning is plus or minus 20, and you can set it all the way to excessive, which is 100. That is a drastic change in sound quality. The preset that I imported sets to plus 20 by default, which gives you a little bit more granular control. It kind of makes it easy if you're not looking to do extreme adjustments. So I'm going to leave that off for now. You also have plugins. This is super cool. The dynamics function actually made quite a big difference on sound. You can change the threshold of this, and this isn't going to be an exclusively improved feature every time. So your mileage will vary depending on your equipment, but these plugins are really cool. You have a convolution filter. You can set to fixed sample rates. I can tell you that regardless of fixed sample rate or not, as the audio source changes, and even on the local player when I'm going from 44 kilohertz to 96, it doesn't have any kind of a weird jump. There's no stutter or pop or anything like that. So it handles switching between bit rates very seamlessly. So I never felt like I had to use that. You can obviously customize this. I don't want to spend too much time on going through every single feature. The gain. Now, this thing is rated to have quite a lot of power, whether you're using balance mode or single-ended. And especially if you're using this for IEMs, even on the middle gain, I have more than enough overhead to get to an uncomfortable listening volume at high levels. High can be used if you're driving a harder to drive headphone, or you're doing very aggressive EQ and you have to reduce your preamp to accommodate for that. The high gain might give you a little bit more overhead to compensate for that negative preamp gain. Now this is a dangerous feature, so do not change this, but line out settings is phone out or line out. If you switch to line out, that is full volume. So if you have something like IEMs plugged into it, you could damage them, especially if you're wearing them, you could damage your hearing. So do not switch this unless you're planning on using this purely as a DAC to then connect to another more powerful headphone amp by doing, let's say, a 3.5 millimeter to dual RCA. So don't change that. Low pass filter, I never felt the need to change this. You have fast and slow in the minimum phase. I usually don't feel like there's a necessity to change this filter into something different than what it comes with out of the box. The arrests are fairly self-explanatory. You can disable certain features if you don't want to use them. But overall, this was a very powerful feature. That's a huge selling point of the R4 in general, is all of this audio tuning out of the box built into the UI, because having system-wide EQ is great. The reason being is if you use Tidal, for example, or another music app, and by the way, you can see I installed and tested quite a few. I have Apple Music, Qobuz, Amazon Music, and then Spotify. I pretty much just use Tidal for the most part. I have memberships on a few of the others, but most of my music is here. So if you're playing music on this and you customize it, and the sample rate icon will change too, but if you're playing it through Tidal, that parametric EQ and the plugins, all of that stuff will apply to this as well. You also have the ability to change the mode. So again, if I swipe down, so let's say this is the screen that you're just sitting on, swipe down a second time, then you can see work mode. Right now it's in Android mode, which is going to consume the most battery life because it's running that full operating system. If you go to pure audio mode, which I can do now, it's basically disabling Android. There's no like home screen that you can tap to load the UI. That's going to improve your battery life a little, and that's now going to work basically as a local player only. However, you will see that the Wi-Fi is still turned on. So if you are using it as a local player, feel free to turn all of this stuff off, which we're going to do now, and then I'll hit the home screen again. Doing so is going to improve your battery life further. So let's go back to here, done. And now I have a local player that's disconnected from the internet. That's probably the best way to get the most battery life out of this. Obviously, dimming the screen helps, which, by the way, this screen gets so dark, like I can't really see anything. And that's kind of dangerous. So I'm going to hopefully, thank God, I found that. I wish they adjusted that scale, to be honest, because on the low setting, I think it's quite weak. And even though it's on the direct mode, you can still access all of these audio settings as well. So you're not losing that function by switching to this mode. So I'm going to swipe down again. Audio mode, we're going to go back. USB DAC mode. Obviously in USB DAC mode, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's no music player built in or playing in the background. It just plays with whatever the USB connection is receiving, which means if you connect it to a laptop, a phone, tablet, etc., this is your DAC and amplifier stage. There's no UAC 1 fallback, so if you're planning on connecting this to something like a PlayStation, I did try that. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, and you can also use this as a Bluetooth receiving mode. So I'm going to switch back. If I hit X, it goes back to Android. If I go to work mode, this is basically just hitting that same button, and now we're in Bluetooth mode. So this is going to look for your mobile device. It'll connect to that, and now you have a much more powerful amplifier for your phone. It can come in handy. Just keep in mind that depending on what phone you have, like if you're using an iPhone, you're not taking advantage of the aptX protocols, which give you a little bit more bandwidth, and technically they will sound better. Some people can't hear the difference, but you are kind of taking away some of the quality that you're paying for with the R4. So I'm going to go back to DAC mode. Let's hit the X, go back to Android, and now we are back to the software. Before I get into sound, I'm just going to tap the picture viewer because it does come with a few pictures from the Evangelion anime. So if you're a huge fan of that, there's some artwork included, and naturally you can customize it and set your own wallpaper, whether you use the Android stuff or something that's provided by Hiby for this theme. At the end of the day, all of these features are cool. The skin, the custom looks, etc. All that's great, but you're getting an audio device because you're using it for audio. We're not exclusively shopping for cosmetics, at least I hope you're not. But I am pleased to say that the R4 sounds exceptional. It's using an ESS DAC, and there's no... I don't want to get into the memes of which DACs are better than others. A lot of it comes down to the implementation that the manufacturer is providing. Now, even at $300+ for the Evangelion edition, this thing sounds amazing, and it punches above its weight. I've used several DACs. I've used much more expensive DACs from other brands, like $1,000 and up. And I can tell you that in a blind listening test, and in some cases, even when you're like listening to them side by side and you're plugging it in, this has sounded better than some of the more expensive DAPs that I've used and tested. it's quite shocking how good it is. It kind of takes away the reason why you would purchase a much more expensive DAC, because sonically I can't imagine hearing any real difference. Maybe there's power overhead, maybe you want some distortion because there's some DAPs that have tubes built in, or like micro tubes. So if you want a different kind of sound, then sure. My thing is, I think why you would buy a more expensive DAP is the ergonomics. Maybe you want something that runs cooler, has significantly better battery life. The big kicker is the application speed and the heat of the device. So this is using a Qualcomm or a Snapdragon 665. Some of the more expensive DAPs have a faster chip. And I think if you're using a nice cell phone that has a good screen, like an OLED screen, and then you switch to something like this, which is IPS and lower resolution, the more expensive DAPs can give you a better visual effect, and that will help feel more premium. Purely on the audio side, this outperformed more expensive DAPs in many cases, and that's a huge feature to me. So if you like the idea of the way this looks, the layout, the themes, customization, where the plugs are located, the fact that it runs a little bit warm, I'm going to keep it brief. It sounds fantastic. It does run a little warm, but never uncomfortably so. My FiiO M23 gets about as hot when I'm playing them for a comparable amount of time. So I was really happy there. And I've heard some reports of people talking about the noise floor on the original R4. I don't know if their gating feature or what they did to change the amplifier stage to this did to affect this, but I don't have any preamp or I don't have any noise floor issues with this particular model. So even if I play it at a high volume and hit pause, or the music is in a very quiet scene, I have no hiss whatsoever. And these are relatively easy to drive IEMs in my opinion. I've tried many different IEMs on it, but even with the Moondrop Meteor, it was perfectly dark in the background, even at higher volumes. So really good design on the power output. I think there's more than enough overhead, like I said, and I'm really, really happy with the sound performance. And I drove much larger and harder to drive headphones. I hooked this up to the Head Audio Headphone 2 that I reviewed recently. I've hooked it up to a few planar magnetic headphones and then several IEMs, and I never felt like it was underpowered, which is another good selling point when you consider just how affordable this is in the grand scheme of things. And that about wraps up the review. So the few gotchas with this is, for this price, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything that sounds better. This is one of the best sounding DAPs I've heard, period. And when you get into more expensive DAPs, I wouldn't purchase those thinking you're always going to get a better sound quality. I think I would consider the more expensive units if you're chasing more battery life, a brighter and better screen, a faster, snappier processor. But where the R4 Evangelion edition kind of kills it is in the value department for audio performance. Yes, it runs a little bit warm, but this particular model with the refined amp structure doesn't seem to run as hot to where it gets uncomfortable. And because this supports rapid charging, it has PD 2.0 with 20-watt charging. Even if this dies on you after 8 hours of use, you can fully charge it in 2 hours anyway. And I'm never using a DAP for more than 8 hours in a charge. Realistically, I'm like 1 to 2 hours here and there. So for me personally, it's been fine. Just keep those things in mind, and I would use that to help decide if this is the right kind of DAP for you. Ergonomically, it's fun. It's very, very different, and the case makes it a little bit more comfortable. Takes away from the aesthetic just slightly, but it will protect it. So this was sent to me for review by Hiby. It obviously doesn't affect what I say about it. I'm always going to keep it honest, and I don't use affiliate links for stuff like this because I don't want you to feel like I'm financially motivated to sell every single thing I cover. But having said that, I will have purchase links in the description below. If you decide to purchase it, just standard purchase links, nothing for the channel support there. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Love to see you at the next video. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.